All right, let's talk about one of the biggest balancing acts in modern farming. How do we grow enough food for a booming population while also taking care of the planet that feeds us? The answer lies in a really smart strategy called nutrient management planning. It's all about hitting that sweet spot between productivity and environmental health. And today, we're going to break down exactly how it works.
So here's our game plan. We'll kick things off by looking at why planning is absolutely essential. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of setting yield goals and using the super important 4R framework. After that, we'll tackle the environmental risks and wrap it all up with how this all fits into a continuous cycle of improvement.
Okay, let's dive right in. First up, we're talking about why just, winging it isn't an option anymore when you're fertilizing crops. The stakes are just way too high.
And this, right here, this is the million-dollar question. I mean, on one side, we need massive yields to keep everyone fed, but on the other, the very things that help us get those yields can cause some serious environmental headaches if we're not careful. Nutrient planning is really our best tool for walking that tightrope.
This slide lays it out perfectly. You've got two massive risks. From an economic standpoint, if a farmer uses too much fertilizer, that's just money down the drain. It directly hits their bottom line. But the environmental risk? That's even bigger. That extra fertilizer doesn't just disappear. It can seep into our groundwater or get washed into rivers, and that can really mess up entire ecosystems. So, knowing the risks, the first step in any good plan is to know what you're aiming for. And that brings us to the absolute foundation of a solid nutrient plan: setting a realistic yield goal. Now, it's really important to get what this means. A realistic yield goal isn't just some dream number you hope to hit. No, it's a cold, hard, data-driven forecast of the best possible outcome for that specific field in that specific season. Every single decision you make, especially how much fertilizer you use, stems from this one critical number. So how do you actually figure out this goal? Well, it's all about the data. You look at what that field has produced over the last 5 years or so. You factor in the soil type and how productive it naturally is. And then, and this is a big one, you look at how much water is available. Finally, you consider the farmer's own management style, things like how they control pests or manage the soil's pH.
Okay, once you have that yield goal, you know roughly how much food your crop needs. But what's the best way to deliver it? That's where our third section comes in, the 4R nutrient framework. This is basically the gold standard for smart fertilization.
And the beauty of this framework is its simplicity. It all boils down to applying the right source of nutrients at the right rate, at the right time, and in the right place. If you can nail these 4 things, you're going to maximize your efficiency and seriously cut down on waste and environmental damage. So let's break down that first R. Right source is all about picking the best tool for the job. Sometimes that's a specially formulated commercial fertilizer. Other times it's an organic source like manure. The right choice always comes down to what the crop needs and what the soil is missing.
Now check this out, because this shows just how different those sources can be. Look at the manure. Poultry manure is loaded with both nitrogen and phosphate. But then you look at swine manure and it's high in nitrogen but pretty low in phosphate. This is exactly why you have to know your source. You can't manage what you haven't measured.
The right rate is where we do a little math. A soil test tells you what's already in the bank, so to speak. You take the total amount your crop needs to hit its yield goal, subtract what's already there, and boom, the number you're left with is the right rate to apply. It's all about filling the gap and nothing more.
And the last 2 R's, right time and right place, go hand in hand. I mean, why do they matter so much? Because timing is everything. If you put nutrients down when the crop isn't ready for them, you're just asking for them to be washed away. And by placing them precisely where they need to be, usually right near the roots, you make sure the plant gets the meal, not the environment. And that brings us right to the environmental side of things. Because when nutrients don't stay on the field, they stop being fertilizer and start being pollution. So let's look at how to manage those specific risks. Now this is a crucial point. Nitrogen and phosphorus are like 2 completely different characters in the soil. Nitrogen in its nitrate form is super mobile. It dissolves in water easily, which means it can leach right down into the groundwater. Phosphorus, on the other hand, is a bit of a homebody. It likes to cling to soil particles, so it's mainly lost when the soil itself washes away.
And because they act so differently, you have to make a choice, especially with manure. If your plan is to apply enough manure to meet the crop's big appetite for nitrogen, you are almost always going to over-apply phosphorus. That extra P just builds up in the soil, creating a huge runoff risk. A much smarter way is a P-based plan. You only apply enough manure to meet the phosphorus needs, and then you add a separate nitrogen fertilizer to top things off.
And these risks get magnified big time when you're farming near environmentally sensitive areas. We're talking about places like streams, wetlands, or even sinkholes, which can basically act like expressways, carrying nutrient pollution from a field straight into our water systems. That's why things like buffer zones are so important in these spots.
So, with all these moving parts, the right source, the right rate, these different risks for N and P, how on earth does a farmer keep it all straight and actually improve year after year? Well, that brings us to our final and maybe most important section. It's about seeing nutrient management not as a one-and-done deal, but as a continuous loop.
This whole idea is called adaptive management. And really, it's just a structured way of saying you make your best plan based on the data you have. Then you go out and do it. But you don't stop there. You check your results. You monitor the crop, you see what the final yield was, and then you act on what you learned to make your plan for next year even better.
And this is what that cycle looks like with today's technology. Precision agriculture lets farmers monitor their fields with incredible detail, map out exactly what each part of the field needs, and then act with pinpoint accuracy. You can actually apply different rates of fertilizer in the same field. It creates this amazing feedback loop that just gets smarter and more efficient every single season.
Which leaves us with one last thing to think about. We talked about the 4 R's of nutrient management, but maybe the most important R isn't on that list. In a world where our climate is changing and our resources are getting more and more scarce, maybe the most critical skill of all is our ability to adapt, to respond, refine, and rethink. That might just be the key to the future of farming. Thanks for watching.